Hey guys, so you remember a couple of months ago when I did a video installing a secondary battery on the CanAm here? Well, if you remember in that video, I was not happy with the wires. They just looked a mess and too many terminals stacked up on one battery terminal. So today we're going to go ahead and solve that problem and install a couple of secondary bus bars to route all the wires on. So let's go ahead and start on that, and I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to start off by taking the whips off, get the flags and whips off of here, get my gas cans off, of course, and there's a cover underneath here. I'll be taking that cover off. That's where I have the secondary battery at. So here's what we're talking about, guys. This is a secondary battery that I mentioned, and you look over here, I've got numerous connections on this positive terminal. Looks pretty bad. I've got numerous connections over here on the negative. Also looks really bad. It's just a mess. So I don't care for that at all. So my plan today is I'm actually going to relocate this relay over to this side. And I have a couple of bus bars that I'm going to install over here. And put all new terminals on here so this don't look so messed up. And get the new terminals, and we'll get those mounted to the new bus bars. And these are the bus bars in question that I'm referencing. You can see there are 6 normal size terminals in there, and then you have 2 of the larger terminals to connect your batteries or your winch, your larger gauge cables. And I've got one for the positive, one for the negative here. And they came with plenty of extra connectors, spade connectors. We've got the screws in there to screw the bus bar down to the plastic in there. But that's what we're going with. Hopefully we'll get a pretty clean setup out of this. I'm actually going to start off here by backing out the terminals on the battery, get this battery disconnected, and I'll pull some of the wires back so I can get to the screw over here holding that relay in there. Take that out, and while I got the wires loose, I'm going to go ahead and mark where I need to drill over here so I can go ahead and relocate that relay. That relay is for my lights. I'm going to relocate that over here beside the battery, open up this whole side over here to put those bus bars in there. Okay, go ahead and pull that out of the way. I'm going to pull the battery out of here for now. And you can see inside of there, this is why I chose this location for my secondary battery. That dip down there is the perfect dimensions for the size of the battery, front to back, left to right. And it sits perfectly flush while it's down in there, so it doesn't go bouncing around or popping out of the pocket or anything like that. This is another thing that I wanted to point out, guys. Take a look at that terminal. It was a round circle, but it was just a junky terminal and it come apart real easy on me. So I'll be cutting all this off and just replacing that with a fresh terminal, do away with all this mess here. And I believe there was another one in here, but like these big terminals, they are just way too big for this little setup, so those will be coming off of there as well, and I'll be replacing those with smaller terminals to better fit that bus bar. first one. How about that? Alright, from here, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting some of these terminals. Again, like this one here, this is just way too big for those small terminals on this ATV battery. It might be good in the automotive industry, but it's just way too big for this little setup. So I'm going to cut those off and install some smaller terminals on there that's more adequate for this machine. And this one's just a butchered mess. That's why I'm replacing that one. Cut off some of this extra slack here. The rest of these I think might be alright. I'll go ahead and grab the bus bar and do a test fit before I make any dedications. That's protective cover that goes over top of it while you got all your connections on there. With that on there, so if anything does happen to come loose, start bouncing around, it's not directly smacking against the terminal. Now the side is still exposed, but hopefully that shouldn't be an issue. And again, right here, guys, I'm just doing a test fit on some of these smaller connections. Make sure everything's going to line up real smoothly without any problems. Got away from me. Alright, so that one's very good actually. It's like a perfect fit. It don't get much better than that. Fits perfectly underneath the screw without hanging over too far on each side to interfere with the next terminal. Because you think about it, you start adding multiple connections on here down the sides. If those spades are too wide, they'll start overlapping each other. And I'm trying to give them clearance so that they set in their each individual socket there. So that's a nice fit there, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that size. This one here was a little questionable, so that looks a little loose there. Now these larger terminals, they do have a lock washer inside of there. If you're familiar with these, you get these larger terminals. They typically they vibrate loose easier than the smaller terminals, so it's good to have these lock washers on there, hold everything in place. But my opinion, this is just way too big for my taste. I don't like how loose that is, even with the nut on there. You can see we could make that work if we wanted to. We could even take another washer, or maybe a larger fender washer of some sort. Well, even that one's too big, but you get the idea. Put a larger washer on there to cover that. But I don't like it being loose like that, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut that one off and replace that with a smaller terminal as well. Gone. Set these in here for now. And before I go ahead and start mounting these in here, I'm going to go ahead and replace these connections that I was talking about. Alright guys, so back at the drawing board, I was planning on taking this relay and routing it over here to the other side. Problem is, it's too short. I don't have enough slack in the wire to run around the battery over there. But I do want to reserve this wall over here for the bus bars. So I'm going to position the relay over here, and I'm going to use a coarse thread screw with a large head on it, so that when I put it through the bracket on the relay, there's still plenty of room to hold it. It'll be locked in place. And the reason I chose to go this route, if you look over here, you got two walls that goes down, and there's a very thin pocket between there. So rather than using a nut and bolt and trying to squeeze fingers, wrenches, whatever between there with everything else underneath there, I figured it'd be a lot simpler to just go this route. That's not a heavy item. It shouldn't pull its way out of there. If it does, I'm probably having much bigger problems. relay in place. Now I can go ahead and mount my bus bars over here, and then I'll take time to start routing the wires over there and getting them anchored down. I'm going to choose to go ahead and take that relay back off for the time being, just to tuck it out of the way so I have more room in here to get my hand and screwdriver in there to put the screws in through the bus bars. Once I get them in place, then it'll be a lot easier to go ahead and remount that relay. The hole is already there though, so that's all that's important for the time being. Alright guys, so to mount this bus bar, again, I don't have much room in here with the wires and everything, but I have plenty of room on the outside underneath the fender there. So I'm actually going to drill in from the other side in, get my pilot holes, and then it'll be a lot simpler to take a screwdriver and the screw to run through the bus bar into the plastic. So if you watch this area here, you should see the drill bit come through in just a moment. Alright, so now I've got my screws put in, or the holes rather, pilot holes. So now I can go ahead and run these screws in place. Alright, so at this point, you can see I've got the screws in both sides of the bus bar. Bus bar is very nice and secure, very solid. It's not going anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and start connecting all my negative terminals on here, get those anchored down, and then I'll start on the top side. Also keep in mind, if you are doing something like this, you also have to have your battery connected to these bus bars as well. Otherwise there's no power going to them. You got to have some form of power feed. So I'll be doing another bridge connection going from negative to negative on the battery, positive on the bus bar going to positive on the battery. Alright guys, so as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terminals connected already with different negatives, and the last one will go from here to the negative on the battery. It'll go from this one here, and again that's just to feed the power through these bus bars so that all these wires can get their current flowing. And the positive terminal will go up above here, the positive bus bar. It'll be the same concept. All the little positive terminals will go on the positive, the little mini positives, and then I'll have one thicker gauge going from the larger terminal, the larger post I should say, on the bus bar to the positive terminal on the battery. Alright guys, so this is what I was talking about. I've got a thicker gauge negative cable going to the larger terminal on the bus bar, and then I have all the little bus bars full of negatives for the various lights, the light bar or the light whips, the rock lights, and I will repeat the process for the second bus bar, the positive bus bar up top. Alright, so we're getting a little bit closer here, guys. Got the positive bus bar installed, and if you look underneath, you can see I have a few connections, positive connections hooked up underneath. I do have my battery tender here plugged in, wired up to here, so I can leave that out and leave it on tender whenever the ATV is not in use, especially during the winter months here. I do have negative cable coming off a negative bus bar that will go up here on the negative post on the battery. Now I'm about to do the same thing, positive cable going from one of the larger terminals here on the positive bus bar will come over to here to the positive terminal on the battery. So I'll go ahead and put all that together and show you the final product once we get it all together. Do a quick test fire, make sure everything's working properly, and close out the video. Alright guys, here we are with the finished product. I've got the bus bars put in. That was the whole purpose of this video. The reason why I did this was two reasons. All the accessories on here, the light bar, the light whips, the rock lights, the additional 12 volt power source, all that stuff, all the positives was stacked on one terminal, all of the negatives was stacked on another terminal, and that's just a bad way to do business. You get too much going on with the vibrations and everything, it can wiggle loose, you can start arcing, cause a fire, melt your wires down. There's a lot of different ways that can go bad. Furthermore, some of the connections that I had, which I'm not sure what I've done with them, I think I threw them away. But anyways, the way the terminals was here at the end of the wire, some of these look pretty bad, was in pretty bad shape. So I ordered some new wire, I ordered some new connectors, and I took the time to trim some of the wires as needed, replace the terminals as needed, and get everything separated on the bus bar. Again, you got all these individual screws in here. Each screw can hold an individual accessory, so you're not stacking everything up on one terminal. Then I have one wire going from the main post here. This comes around over to the positive, and if you look below that, the negative also has one coming off of the main post on the negative bus bar. Wire comes through here and onto here. So yes, I do have 2 wires on each, but that's a lot better than 4 or 5 wires on each post. Down the road, if you're familiar with Motobat, they actually, that's a brand name of battery, a yellow battery. They actually have 2 positives on one side of the battery, and they have 2 negatives on the other side of the battery, which would be perfect for a setup like this, so I can run my positive for the bike on one terminal and my positive for the bus bar on another terminal. Again, this is just to isolate all of my accessories and break it down individually so it's not stacked. You get too much current flow in one stack, too much power flow with all those little bitty terminals. You can arc, you can spark, you can smoke, you can melt the wires down. Worst case scenario, start a fire. So this is just a safer way to go about it. And again, this is my secondary battery. My primary is located underneath. This is for the starter only. And, well, fuel pump and the original equipment that came from CanAm. The fuel pump, the injectors, the stock headlights. All the original stuff that was stock for the bike was tied into the main battery. Winch and all the other accessories I now have tied into this battery here. And again, the main reason, the purpose for that is you get to run in your lights and all your accessories. Worst case scenario, you start winching and you run that battery down and then you end up with a no start. And you don't want to leave your machine stuck in the woods with a no start. I had to do that once, and that's what actually prompted me to go into this setup here. Winch and everything else runs off of here. So no matter how dead I run this battery, I still have that primary backup battery. shouldn't call it backup. That's primary battery underneath. That's the starter battery. It'll start the bike every time, no matter how dead this battery gets. I hope that makes sense to you guys. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick I'm going to clean all this off and do a quick test fire. And I'm going to turn on the accessories, make sure everything's lighting up, doing what it's supposed to do. Make sure the isolator is doing its job. And once I know that, I'll put the lid on and wrap it up and call it done. Alright, well, I got everything cleaned up. I've got the whips hooked back up. And as far as I can tell, everything is squared away. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the lights and see that everything's working. There's the light bar. You can see that coming off and on. There is the rock lights. Excuse me, the whips. Rock lights are also activated. So the rock lights are working, the whips are working. I believe the only test left to do is to feed current through the battery tender and make sure that the isolator is clicking, doing its job between the batteries. So I think we're good. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments below, and I'll be glad to get to them. I'll answer whatever questions I can. And if you have any concerns about anything I've done, let me know. I would be very interested to see if there's a better way of doing this. And if you have any links on anything that you've done before, drop those in the comments below. I'd also like to check out your work. I'm always open for learning new material. Thanks again for watching, guys.